QuickBooks Pro Plus Desktop 2022 Memorized Reports. Get ready because we bookkeeping pros are moving up the hilltop with QuickBooks Pro Plus Desktop 2022. Here we are in our free QuickBooks sample file, sample raw castle construction, going through the setup process with the view drop down, the open windows list on the left hand side, the company drop down, company home page, opening in the middle, maximizing that home page to the gray area. We're going to start off opening up the balance sheet and then take a look at the reports and the memorized reports. Let's go to the reports drop down, go on down to the company and financial, open up that balance sheet standard report, balance sheet standard. In prior presentations, we looked at the categories as to where we could sit or memorize the memorized reports, which we can see within any report by then going to the memorized tab up top and say we want to save this report into a special group, hitting the drop down, this list of groups then being different than the default list. We set those up in a prior presentation. So if you have a different list or you haven't seen the prior presentation and you don't know where these are coming from, then you can look at that presentation. Now we want to go into these in more detail and think about how we might use this default setting. Note that this list right here will be different than what we will see when we first go into the memorized list and the memorized report center, due to the fact that there's nothing currently in some of these subcategories. Therefore, they're not going to show anything except this last one, the name. So I'm going to close this back out, not going to memorize it. Go to the reports drop down, take a look at the report center. The report center typically opening up, we're going to maximize it here to the standard tab. We want to open it to the memorize. Let's go on over to the memorize tab. And now note we only have one category here because that's the only category that I actually saved a report to, even though there are other categories we created which don't have any reports memorized to them yet. We can see them by going to the edit memorized reports list up top. So let's take a look at that. And here's what we set up last time. This is not the only way you could set up the memorized reports, but this is one way that you might do it as a bookkeeper or as someone that's working either with clients or as a bookkeeper within a company, to think about your internal reports and then your external reports. And then if we are a bookkeeper, we might then say, hey, I'm going to try to customize my reports for my different clients in a similar kind of way, grouping them so that I have the year-end reports and the month-end reports that I expect to give to the clients. That's basically our product to show what we have done for them. And then I also want to go in and then give them the year-end reports, which might look a little bit different because we might need the year-to-date reports in a current year versus the prior year comparisons, for example, and so on. So I'm only going to look at the balance sheet reports right now and think about what might we want to include in like the month-end reports that we would be given to a client or given to a supervisor, and what might we want to include then in the year-end reports on the balance sheet. Then when we get to the income statement or profit and loss, which is our next section, we'll have a category in terms of how we can memorize those reports in a similar kind of fashion. So let's start off with the balance sheet standard report on the left-hand side. This is the standard balance sheet report that we could do our standard kind of customization to make it look more professional or in alignment with what we think we want our reports to look like. We might start off, if we were given a balance sheet report at the end of each month, then let's start off with the summary report. That might be the first place to go to give them something that's not overwhelming on top of the report. Now notice if you're giving the reports to somebody else, like a client, and they're not an accountant, then your goal is to give them enough information to make them feel like you're doing good work here. At the same time, not overwhelm them, to give them information that they can actually use for their personal decision-making processes. So on the month-end reports, after time passes, they might actually not be as important to some clients that are smaller clients because they might be using that report, but not so much because they're doing their day-to-day business. If it's going the way it's going, that's fine. And then at the end of the year, they really want to know that you're going to be there for them at the end of the year when you're going to have to compile more reports, possibly then doing taxes and then or helping out the CPA by printing reports for taxes and so on. So what you're doing throughout the year then is really saying, hey, look, I'm here for you. I'm here. Here's my reports, making them look professional and whatnot, and showing them so that at the year end, you have what you need. So let's go ahead and first start off with the summary reports. I'm going to go to the reports dropdown, company and financial, and let's say we're going to go down to the balance sheet summary report. Balance sheet summary report. And let's do our standard kind of adjustments to it. So we're going to say customized reports up top. I'm thinking about my clients over here, so we want to adjust it. The display time, let's just imagine that it's at the end of, say, a month. Let's say it's at the end of the third month, March. So let's say it's as of 03/31/23, so 03/31/23. So that's the end of March, let's say. And then we're going to then go into the filters here. We could then say we're going to then have the filters, okay, header and footer. We're going to say company and financial, report title, summary balance sheet. We could just keep it at summary balance sheet. And then the date looks good. And then date prepared, I can remove this, remove timestamp, report basis. And then on the page number, we'll keep that. The footer, we might put our name so they know who we are. I'll just put my name here. And then print footer on first page, we will keep that. Font group, we might say I want to remove the cents. We want to have, say, in parentheses, we might have the negative numbers to be red. We might increase the font size. We might say, hey, look, I want to do a little bit on the font and say, let's bring that font up to like 11 for them and say, okay. And I'm going to do that for the whole thing. And then I might include, so let's say, okay, see what it looks like. So there we have that. So I brought it up to 11. I believe I'm going to go to customize reports again, font group. And then I also might want the title, for example, to stand out possibly. So I might say name on the name, change the name, and I'm going to make that drop down, going to make that red, and then say okay, or okay here. And then just on the name, so I'll say no, and then okay. So now we've done a little bit more customization to it, and say this is our starting point. The first thing we might want to give someone with regards to the balance sheet in the stack of reports that we're going to provide them. And I'll talk about how we might want to group these in a future presentation. But now let's just memorize it. So I'm going to say memorize this report, and then I'm going to save it into the memorized reports. And I'm going to say this is going to be the client month end report. So it's right there. And I might then change the name here just to say month end, just so I can see that in the name. So I'm going to save that. And then if I went to my memorized reports list, over here, we've got that item in the month end report. So that looks good. If I go back to the summary report, so we have that. Then the next thing I might want to do is to change this a little bit further. It's already memorized, so I can change it a little bit further now and then memorize it again. I might, for example, want to have a vertical analysis type of report as well with the summary report. So I might then go, okay, let's go to the customized report up top. And you can see how many variants of this report you can have just with 1 month of data, and how you can overwhelm the client, or you got to think about how exactly you want to put this together so you can give them enough information to kind of impress them without overwhelming them, right? Which is a balancing act. So then we can go down here and say, well, let's do the percentage of column information. And so that'll be like our vertical analysis report. And I'm going to go to the header and footer and say this is our balance sheet summary vertical analysis. Vertical analysis. Hopefully I spelled that right. It's quite possible I didn't. Let's say, okay, I think I fixed it now, or I tried to fix it. There's a Y in there somewhere, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so then now we've got our vertical analysis with the percents drop downs on it. So now I'm going to try to save that again. I'm trying not to overwrite the last one I did, but save it as another report. So I'm going to say memorize report, and I don't want to replace the current one under the same name. I want to make a new one with a new name, and this one's going to be the summary report vertical analysis, and I'm going to say this is for the month end reports, and I'm going to put this under the same category. So I'm going to say okay. There we have it. If I check it now, reports drop down, memorize reports. Under the month end reports, now we've got these two that are there that were created and generated from that first report. The next one I might want to do is I might want to say, let's do a comparison for the year to date kind of information comparison. So I might say, okay, customize reports. Now I could do a comparison just to the prior month, or I might want for the 3 months that are in this quarter. So for example, I could say, all right, let's do this from 01/01/23 to 03/31/23 and change this to months now, months. And then I'm going to say no percent of columns and say okay. And so now we've got our three months laid out side by side. And let's customize this report and say that we're going to call this one then the balance sheet for the quarter or the 3 quarters or something by month, balance sheet by month, let's say. So we'll say that looks good, and I'll say okay. And so let's memorize that one. I'm going to say let's memorize that report. New one, I'm not going to replace it. I want a whole new one here. And then here it is. It's going under the same category. Okay. Checking it. Going to the reports drop down. Memorize reports. And there they are. Now we got those 3 there. And then we might do another one. Say now I want to do a side-by-side horizontal analysis with this one. Customize reports. And we're going to go, okay, now what I want to do is bring this back up to 03/01/23. I know I'm doing these fast. We've seen them in the past, but just to give you an idea of how you could kind of group these together on your month-end information and say, now I want to say that I want to do a previous period comparison with the dollar signs and the percentages, and I'm going to call that the summary balance sheet, and this is going to be a vertical analysis. No, this is going to be horizontal analysis, or what did I call this? A comparative balance sheet. Let's put that here, right here. Comparative. Hopefully I spelled that properly, which I may not have, and I apologize if I didn't. I'm deeply sorry that I misspelled it, but this isn't spelling course. We're going to say memorize the report, but spelling's important. You don't want it misspelled. But in any case, we're going to say new. This is going to be a comparative. We'll put that in the same area and say okay. So now we've got just on the balance sheets. This might be an overkill. You might not need this many balance sheets. Depends on what you want to give this, but you can see how much you could do as a few months passed just with the balance sheets. So then we could add the more detailed balance sheet. So let's go to the normal balance sheet on the left-hand side. And we could do, in essence, the same thing here. We could say, okay, here's our normal balance sheet. Let's customize it. Let's go to the dates, and let's bring the dates from 01/01/23 to 03/31/23. And then let's go to the headers and footers. This is going to be the balance sheet for the month end. And then we're going to say that we're going to have the subtitle there. No date, no time, no report basis. In the footer, we're going to put our name in the footer on the fonts and numbers. Let's make it a little bit larger here, bringing that up to 11. So okay. I'm going to put that on all of it. And then let's just check that out. Okay. And then back to the customized reports, fonts and numbers. We're going to make the name red as we did before, changing the font, making it red like that. And then okay, only applying this. So I'm going to say no to that one name. And then we're going to say that we want the parentheses red, and then we're going to remove the pennies. So there we have it. So that looks good. So now I want to save that to possibly the month-end reports as well. So let's go, okay, let's save that, customize the report. I shouldn't put the month-end in the title. That's not right. I shouldn't do that. Let's remove that. What are you thinking? That doesn't make any sense. Balance sheet, okay. And then we're going to go to, now I'm going to save that one, putting that also in our customized area. This is where I put the month end and that name. Okay. And then we could do the same thing here. I could say, okay, let's make this one then customize reports. Let's do a 3-month comparison, making this the months, and say, let's do the months here. Do the 3-month comparison. We're going to call that a balance sheet by month comparison. And so we're going to say, okay. balance sheet by month. And so there we have it. Hold on a second. Something doesn't look quite right. I'm going to say customize report. And we said half month, not half month, month. Okay, there we go. And then I could say customize, memorize that one. And we're going to say new report. And this is going to then month. And I'm going to say ME. Okay. So there we have that. And then we might want to do a comparative balance sheet. So I could say, let's hit the drop down and say we want a comparative. So let's say the current month, 03/31/23 to let's say 03/01/23 to 03/31. And then I want to compare with the previous month, change and percent change. Okay. So there we have that. And I could memorize that, but I also want to customize the name. Headers and footers, we're going to say balance sheet. Let's say this is simply a comparative balance sheet. Okay. Memorize in that one. Memorize new item comparative, saving that in the same area, and okay. So now we've got our comparative balance sheet. We might want the vertical analysis balance sheet. So we're going to say, all right, let's customize the reports up top. And let's make another one and say we're going to go to the vertical. Let's remove this now. The dates will be fine. And let's just do the percent of columns and then call this a vertical analysis, which I can't spell. So let me try it. This is the vertical analysis, which has a Y in it. Something like that. That's kind of right. I think that's closer than I was before. And then let's memorize that one. New. And then ME. Vertical analysis. Okay. So there we have. So now if I go to the reports drop down and I go to memorize reports and go to just that month end, you can get an overwhelming number of reports just from the balance sheet reports that as we compare and contrast the different months and so on. You might compare it, you might do a comparison to the prior year as of the same time period and so on and so forth. And you can see how the quarter end, they might be slightly different. You might say, hey, now I'm going to compare quarter to quarter and not so much month to month. So this is actually a quarter end. You could do it a little bit differently. And then at the year end, you might do a year to year comparison and so on. And you could have some different reports that would be involved. Now, if this was a report that's going to be an internal report, maybe I don't need so much of this on an internal report. If it was internal, maybe if I go to customize reports up top, I just want to keep it at a normal report. And then on the header and footer, I don't need the vertical analysis. It's just simply going to be a balance sheet. And then I don't need the time. I might want the date, time, and report basis for my internal report. I don't really care about the footer or not. Fonts and numbers. Maybe I want the pennies on the internal, but maybe I like the negative and the bracketed numbers. And maybe on the internal reports, I like the font to be at that 14, an even larger font possibly. And we're going to say okay. And so let's say this is our internal balance sheet that we would want. So I can then memorize this report and say we want a new report and say that we want this to be an internal report. So we can go, okay, let's say save this one. This one's going to go into an internal report. That's the one that I use for my own reporting. So now if I was to use this every time I'm going into my data input, when I go into the home page, enter invoices, enter sales receipts, and I verify that to the financials, I might say, okay, I'm going to go to the drop down and I'm going to go to my internal reports here, memorize reports, and then these reports, and look at that balance sheet, because that's the way I like to see it to compare, versus when I make the month-end reports, I can possibly group them together in such a way that I can then demonstrate them and show them to the client that I think is best for the user who I'm aiming at, in that case, that being the client. We also might memorize a report like a trial balance for internal use, which I like to use. I might go to the reports, accounting and taxes, trial balance. And this one, again, I might want to raise, say, customize fonts and numbers. Maybe I like to see the parentheses, the negative with parentheses, and then make them red, and then increase the font size to like 14 so I could see it, and okay, and say yes and okay. And I might use this for my internal purposes. I wouldn't normally give this to a client because doesn't have those subtotals, but it's nice and easy to use internally. So I might then say, let's memorize this report and then save this report. And I'm going to put this into my internal reports and say once again, okay. So there we have that. So now if you go to your memorize reports list, or if I was just, let's close it out and go into the memorize reports again. If I close this out, go to the reports drop down and go into the report center. And then if I go on over to the memorize reports tab, so now you can see more of these lists are showing because I have more activity in them. So we've got the one by name and the one by the client. If I put this in list format, then you could see these items and I can start to think, okay, if it's year end now, these are the reports that I would like to generate. These are the reports I would like to then group together and provide to the client in some way, shape, or form, possibly by email, possibly by giving them access to the report or printing them out in some way. And that allows me to standardize it a lot more easily. And then these reports possibly are the ones that I like formatted for my internal use so that I can make them as easily as possible. And as I do the data input, jump to the reports I like to see. Again, notice that these reports, how many reports that we put in here just related to balance sheet reports that a client may want to see. And so the next question you got to balance is, I need to balance between overwhelming the client with too many reports and impressing them to the fact that, look, I'm doing my job. I'm giving you the reports you need. Here's all the information you need. I'll be here at the year end. We'll have a whole bunch more reports we will add to this when we get to the income statement reports that we might include in here as well, that being the other kind of report that's going to be the most common. We'll do that in the next section. In the next presentation, we'll think about how we might group these reports for presentation, either emailing it to a client or through attachments or printing them out.